So as I say, Housing Action is celebrating its 35th anniversary. And you know, Housing Action is a robust network of plus 160 member organizations and a powerful voice for positive change. Since our founding, since our founding, hundreds of partners and supporters have come together to make progress towards an Illinois where everyone has an affordable place to call home. Please join me in welcoming Tiffany Smith. She's the Associate Director from NHS Chicago, who's partners of Housing Action, and they put together with his team all this presentation. So Tiffany.
Thank you so much. Felly, go to the next screen. So first of all, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to spend the next hour-ish with us to kind of really walk through the appraisal process and how we can better serve our clients in educating them so that they are empowered throughout their buying and selling process. But a little bit about us first. Neighborhood Housing Services is really here to help our clients, our residents, be able to buy, fix, and keep affordable homes in neighborhoods of choice. We do this through educating and counseling our residents on both pre-purchase activities as well as once you've bought the home. We're going to hold your hand all the way through that life cycle to make sure you know what to do to keep that home up and to transition that wealth through your generations. In addition to that, we help in neighborhoods by lifting up blocks, by revitalizing vacant homes, and doing a lot of beautification, which is one of my favorite things to do. And then also we create a gateway for folks who are having a little bit of a challenge or who are looking for alternative products to help them become first-time homeowners through our neighborhood lending services. The product we're most known for is our purchase rehab, so that folks can find that property that maybe needs a little extra love, but they have vision and they can roll that cost all into one. And so we help people do that. And then finally, housing development, identifying opportunities within our communities to increase the inventory so that we can still, in another way, keep affordable homeownership possible. So we've been around for 47 years and we are looking forward to another 47. In that time, we have developed over 1,200 units of affordable housing. And now it's 47 years, I have to change that date. Educated over 44,000 home buyers and saved over 10,500 people from foreclosure, which is huge and something we are very proud of. And that number just keeps growing. Bigger impact, or the thing that I find so impactful, is that we've loaned over 650 million people dollars to families to actually help them realize their American dream. So today, we are going to talk to you about a really big part of that American dream, which is appraisal process and the really realizing the value that our properties should have, and making sure we're understanding the process so that we can identify when it's happening, when it's not happening, and what do you do when you find out, hey, that's not what's really happening, and how we can guide our clients through that process and make sure that they are empowered and they know the process inside and out. What may feel personal to us could still be the process. So we want to make sure that people clearly understand what the process is. Next slide. So Fallon Young, who is our policy associate at Neighborhood Housing Services, is going to talk to you really about the step-by-step. Andre Lanier, who is just, you're going to be entertained because Andre will tell you the real deal. And he is really going to tell us what that process looks like in real life. We know what it looks like on paper. Here's what you should expect, and here are the tools you can use to really empower your customers. And then I believe Sherry Smith, who is our senior homeownership counselor, will be around as well to help us answer some questions. And then I am here as well to guide and take your questions. Just a point of housekeeping. In your Zoom, you will see an option for Q&A. Your questions are so important to us. I don't want to miss any. Please put your questions in the Q&A. They tend to get lost in the chat. Okay. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Fallon. Fallon.
Thank you, Tiffany. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As Tiffany mentioned, my name is Fallon Young. I'm the policy associate at NHS Chicago. And again, today we're going to be talking about the appraisal process. So our objectives today are to best prepare new home buyers and sellers for the appraisal process, to understand the role of appraisers, and to help assist potential victims of appraisal bias in pre and post-purchase counseling. Oh, having some issues with my, okay. So what is an appraisal? An appraisal determines the value of your home and is performed by a licensed appraiser. And the appraisal is very critical in the home buying process. It ensures that home buyers are able to pay a fair, reasonable price for their home, receive the full value that their home is worth, and access, oh, my apologies, and access all the equity in their home as well. So now we will move into the appraisal process and all the steps that go into that, if you are buying, selling, or refinancing. So when you're buying a home, the first thing a client is going to do is complete the loan application. Then the lender orders the appraisal. The appraisal is conducted and the appraiser comes to that subject property. The report is created, and then lastly, the appraisal is submitted for review. This is the same steps for refinancing. The only thing that's different is that the client will be completing refinancing paperwork and any financial documents that are tied to that. And then in selling a home as a seller, the client will first sign that purchase agreement and the buyer as well. The lender then orders the appraisal conducted, the report is created, and then submitted for review. So the first step is submitting a loan application for a home buyer. So if you're seeking to build a home, obviously you typically need financing and will apply for a mortgage loan, whether that's purchase, refinance, construction, or for home equity with a lending institution. And again, the purpose of that appraisal is to ensure the price of a home is a fair value, to estimate the value of the home to be used as a collateral for the mortgage, and determine how much equity you have in a home to refinance. So after that, any financial paperwork is submitted to your lender. The lender then orders the appraisal. This happens after the home buyer puts in an offer on the home, has it accepted, and signs the purchase agreement. And as a seller, the appraisal happens after they have listed their home and signed the purchase agreement with the buyer. That appraisal request is then submitted and forwarded to an individual appraiser or an appraisal management company who typically works with that financial institution, and they will conduct the appraisal, and the client will be notified when that appraisal is scheduled. So the cost of an appraisal. So if your client is buying or refinancing a home, they pay for the cost of that appraisal. So most single family homes typically cost around $200 to $600, and multifamilies can cost up to $600. This cost can be more if it's an FHA loan due to the additional requirements and guidelines that are in that loan. But the best time to bring up the cost of an appraisal is when your client is ready to choose a mortgage broker. So after paying, your client will be notified when their appraisal is scheduled, and the appraiser will come to the home. This on-site inspection can last anywhere from 15 minutes to several hours. And during the inspection, the appraiser will do a thorough evaluation of the home, taking photos of the inside and outside of the home and making observations on the home. So these are some of the things that an appraiser will take note of, such as the square footage, lot size, number of bedrooms and bathrooms, the location of the home in the neighborhood, any upgrades or added features of the home. So what I just described is a full on-site inspection. There are different types of appraisals that can be conducted, such as a drive-by appraisal or a desktop appraisal. So in a drive-by appraisal, this is conducted without the appraiser entering the home. A licensed appraiser will examine the home from the outside and make their evaluation based on the exterior. And this costs less than a full appraisal. And this has happened more frequently due to COVID-19. And in a desktop appraisal, this is one that is performed without an appraiser conducting an on-site inspection. So all the research is done, as the name suggests, at their desk, and this costs less than a full appraisal. An appraiser will use tax records and multiple listing services, which is a resource that is only available to real estate professionals to make their evaluation. Again, this is also less than a full appraisal, and in March of this year, the GSEs, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, have allowed the use of more desktop appraisals instead of that full on-site inspection. And again, both of these, an appraiser is not present in the home. With a drive-by, they're outside of it. Desktop, they're not even at the home. So these could be less accurate than a full appraisal, which could cost your client a lot of money if the valuation isn't accurate. So if the property does need an on-site full appraisal, please have your client request one from their lender. And due to COVID-19, an appraisal can also rely solely on an exterior inspection and interior photos and videos of the home that the client provides. We recommend advising clients to take down any items indicating race, such as family photos, paintings, etc., to mitigate appraisal bias, which will be discussed shortly. So after the appraiser comes to the home and evaluates the home and makes their evaluation, they will then create the report. So there are 3 different approaches an appraiser can choose to get to the value of their home. First is the sales comparison approach. This entails selecting comparable homes to the main property and making adjustments to the value of the home. And this is typically the most common approach. The second is the cost approach, which is how much it would cost to build or replace the home depending on the size and the local construction costs. And lastly is the income approach, which is used for income generating property, in which the appraiser estimates how much the property is expected to make. Again, the sales comparison approach is the most typical common approach that is used. So how are comparables chosen? So comparables are chosen using the following criteria. There are homes that have sold in the neighborhood, typically in the last 3 months, have the same characteristics as the subject property, and in the same neighborhood as that home or ones nearby. The appraiser will make adjustments, additions, or subtractions to the value of the home based on these comparables. And again, this is located in the appraisal report. So lastly, the appraisal is submitted for review. So the client will receive a copy of the appraisal. This is required by law under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. And so a home buyer will receive this, or the homeowner if they're refinancing, regardless of the loan decision. If your client is selling their home, they do not receive a copy of the report, but they can request one from their lender. And the report will contain everything used to come up with the valuation, such as those specific properties that were used as comparables, also some information on the neighborhood, which is the general market data, and also some information on the location of the home, all of this that impacts the value and the estimation of the home. So recognizing appraisal bias, we have seen appraisal bias come up a lot in news where, for instance, a family will receive an appraisal that is lower than what they expected, and they will order a second one and remove certain items that indicate their race, and all of a sudden they have a higher appraisal. Or if there's a property in which a Black family is living in, and let's say they substitute that family out for a white family, and they see those discrepancies in that appraisal value, that is indicative of appraisal bias. And many Black and brown families have experienced appraisal bias and discrimination, resulting in a significant devaluation of homes and neighborhoods. And when a home is improperly valued, that hurts the homeowner and the surrounding neighborhood. So we at NHS, our policy department has partnered with Chicago Rehab Network in leading our appraisal equity campaign, in which we are wanting to educate consumers and housing counselors on the issue of appraisal bias, and making sure that people know what the appraisal process is, and having proactive steps beforehand before having to react later to that lower value. So we also created an appraisal incident form, which is a survey that people can fill out if they have suffered discrimination or have had issues with their appraisal value. So we recommend that if you have any clients who have had an issue with this, to fill out this survey so we can better understand their situation and help them seek relief, whether that's talking to their lender or trying to get them a second opinion. So preparing for the appraisal. So next we will review how to best prepare for that appraisal process. And this is very important to make sure that you get an accurate valuation of the home. So these are some steps that we recommend to take to prepare to research your appraiser, contact the client's realtor, find comparable homes, which your realtor can help you do, submit an appraisal package, which is something that a realtor can help your client put together, provide evidence of home improvements to your appraiser before the appointment, and to make renovations to the home and tidy up, and lastly, to be present at the appraisal appointment. So the first step is to research your appraiser. So some questions that you can ask the lender is, what is the name of the appraiser? How much field experience does this appraiser have in that neighborhood, and the physical address, and what AMC does the appraiser work for? You can also, once you know the name of your appraiser and you have that scheduled appointment, you can contact the appraiser and ask them their full contact information, their office address, email, telephone number, how long they have been appraising in your local market, the travel distance from their office to your neighborhood. And another last important question, just to show that your client is an educated consumer and knows their neighborhood, is how familiar is that appraiser with the driving forces that affect the sales price from a buyer's perspective in that neighborhood, and what are some of those driving forces? And all of these questions can indicate if the appraiser's office is local, and that can also tell you if that appraiser knows how to properly and accurately assess the value of that home. And the next tool to research your appraiser is to use the IDFPR's directory. This is linked in the presentation, but we will also send this out after the webinar. So you can go into this directory, type in the first and last names of the client's appraiser to find their credentials, their status, years active, or if that appraiser has been disciplined or has any infraction. And you can also Google the appraiser for any reviews to see if they've had any negative reviews associated with them as well. The next step to do when preparing for your appraiser is to contact the realtor to help your client put together an appraisal package. An appraisal package is a package on the home, the neighborhood, that you could provide the appraiser before they come to the home, and again is shared with the appraiser prior to the appointment. The packet contains the following for your appraiser to consider, such as property info, listing info, an offer list if you receive multiple offers on your property as a seller, the condition and room count, comparable properties list, or comparative market analysis. So you can choose those comparative properties to send the appraiser so they don't have to do the work. The neighborhood market report, or property upgrades, and recent receipts of improvements. And I believe Tiffany dropped this in the chat, so you can see a sample appraisal package and everything that goes into that. The next thing to do is to share evidence of your home improvements with the appraiser. So we call this creating an informational packet. So you want to include any improvements that were made over the last 15 years, upgrades, renovations, designations of historical value of the home in writing, and to include receipts of all improvements and proof of permits. You can also work with your client to verify those comparables that the realtor chooses. And this can be done using realtor.com. So when you go into the site, you can use that map to explore those comparable properties, as well as the neighborhoods that those properties are in, to compare them to the subject home and neighborhood. You could also look at those details, such as the date sold, the price, and number of bedrooms. And if the site which the site does allow. You can use other filters to look at the school and neighborhood amenities to get more details for those comparable properties. And also make sure that the home is ready for the appraisal appointment. So some things that can be done to raise the value of your client's home is to declutter, remove any family photos to minimize bias again, maintain landscaping and curb appeal. So shovel the snow, rake the leaves, mow the lawn, or make any minor repairs and upgrades as needed. So as a housing counselor, talk to your client to assess what renovations need to be done to make sure their home is in the best condition for that appraisal. So that would include any repairs for health and safety issues, addressing any accessibility needs, air conditioning repairs, and to add upgrades to add functionality and value as needed. And lastly, be present at the appraisal. So if you are refinancing or selling, you can be present at that appraisal appointment. As a home buyer, you're typically not required to be present, but you can, as a home buyer, you can request that your realtor, broker, or another representative who is knowledgeable about the home or the neighborhood to be present. So next we will hear from Andre Lanier, a certified residential real estate appraiser. Andre is a Chicago native who for over 20 years has skillfully and objectively represented the market value of residential and commercial properties for collateralization in all 77 Chicago neighborhood communities. So I will hand it over to Andre to speak a little bit about what the appraisal process looks like, actually from the appraiser's perspective.
Okay, can everyone see my screen? No, hold on.
Not yet, Andre. Doesn't look like it's sharing.
Okay, let me hit start share.
Mhm.
How about now?
Perfect.
Okay, let me start the presentation. Thank you.
You can just hit slideshow
Okay,
on the top.
I'm trying to hit the slide so I can't get to
Yeah,
it.
keep going. And after animations, you will see a slideshow.
Oh, the top of it is in the
Yes.
way here. I'm trying to get to.
Yeah,
Actually,
up.
Andre, the other alternative is at the bottom of your screen.
Yes.
Do you see the little square box next to the sizing bar to the right?
Yes.
Yep, to the left. No, to the right again. One more. Perfect. Click. Nope.
This way.
You're going. Yes, click. Nope. The one to the right. You were right on it. Go back to your right.
Am I right? Live sorter. Okay.
Keep going. There you go. No, keep one more slideshow. There you go. Click it.
We okay?
Perfect. There you
Okay.
go. Wonderful.
So, as you know, I am a licensed appraiser. I'm not a techie, so I apologize, but I'm getting there. So now we're going to get to the heart of the matter. I saw there was a couple of surveys of the participants here today, and I saw that there was a few of you that had already encountered some appraisal issues with your clients. So my role here today is to really go to the heart of the matter. When you do encounter an appraisal issue, first of all, how to understanding the appraisal and development process. So understanding what an appraisal is and what's going into it. Secondly, how to recognize and document those incidents. Because ultimately, when your clients are coming into you on the front lines, they have the pain point. It's like, okay, you want more than, hey, it's going to be all right. You want to address the situation in a professional way, and actually you want to get an outcome. So you want a reconsideration of value. You want a brand new appraisal done. If there's some action that needs to be taken against the appraisal, this has to be done in a documented professional manner from an appraisal approach. when you're making a case, so that you and yourself and the clients are not approaching it from a subjective matter. And also, I'm going to talk about the tips on how to build your case. And ultimately, because everybody wants to win. So if they get it wrong, ultimately, at the end of the day, you want them to get it right. Okay. So, what is an appraisal and what are the standards? And just understanding what an appraisal is. We all know what's going on in terms of the low valuation in the Black and brown communities. The low valuation is really the strong winds. But ultimately, the hurricane in the appraisal process is the actual development and reporting irregularities that's involved. And each appraisal is not a subjective process. So it's not as though you have all of these appraisers that are out here and they're all out here operating on their own, like mavericks, and doing things the way that they may seem that they are. There is a standard on how we operate and what we're supposed to do. First and foremost, what we're guided by the government through what's called Uniform Standards of Appraisal Practice. So it tells us specifically, even before you get into this profession, you have to take coursework, you have to go through this, and it's almost a Bible worth of information. Tells you exactly what is your protocol, what is the outcome that you are required to have when you do an appraisal. And the two standards that we're going to focus on is on the development, and the other one is on the reporting. Because when you are trying to get a reconsideration of value, or you're trying to get some action taken against an appraiser, if there has been a fair housing or discrimination issue, you have to go to the heart of the matter, which is from a development and reporting standpoint. So these standards that I have are really directly out of USPAP, and these are standards that you're going to right-click, copy, and paste, and you're going to use this verbiage and this language and these standards directly in your reconsideration of value, your complaints, whoever you're communicating to when you're making a case, when you're trying to get your appraisal corrected. So when you operate from this standpoint, this is going to give you the most likelihood of success in that. So in the development process, USPAP says directly that appraisers, must be clear in their development and what they're doing. It has to be credible. So ultimately, if they're not developing, oftentimes you say, okay, I got the low valuation. There is a low valuation. I don't feel that my appraisal is collateralized. It's not. The mistake that has been made, whether it was on purpose or not, is that it was in the development. So they actually used inferior comparables. They didn't use apples to apples. So in that is an appraisal standard infraction. So that is how you're going to attack it. In terms of USPAP, in addition to standards and standard ones, they also have comments. So what a USPAP comment is that they don't say that, hey, not only do we have a standard on how you're supposed to develop the appraisal, but they also break it down in these comments. So they make sure you as appraiser that you are clear on what you're supposed to do in terms of your due diligence. So an appraiser it's up to them to have their due diligence, to be knowledgeable of the area, to be versed on construction, and also marketing, because when you have different price points in a neighborhood, you're marketing to different buyer submarkets. Also, you can see that there's language in there that relates to social change as well. So as an appraiser, we're supposed to know everything that's going on in that neighborhood, from a construction standpoint to the different buyers price point, how it's marketed, what's the different, what's going on socially, in that neighborhood. And that's a constant, that's a fluid motion. So with that, and this is taken straight word for word out of USPAP. So we as appraisers, we're supposed to be knowledgeable and versed on that. How do we become that? How does that happen? Well, I am a licensed realtor, so I have the advantage that I actually work with buyers on a daily basis. So I'm hand in hand with a buyer, and they're telling me what they like, what they don't like, what they find appealing, what they don't find appealing. So I have that different advantage. But appraisers have to work hand in hand with realtors. So how they become geographically competent is that they actually have to have those dialogues with those realtors about that market, about their subject property. Why did this sell at this price? Why did this sell at that price? What does this particular buyer like about this or that? They have to comb those neighborhoods and know what's appealing. They need to know what the schools are in that different neighborhood. They got to know, especially in Chicago, we're a block by block city. You have to know what's appealing to different buyers in different pockets within the same neighborhood. So you have to be visible on the ground and have interactions with the real estate professionals in that neighborhood. You have to know the developers. So when those developers are, putting up product in that neighborhood, you need to know them by name. You need to go out and be on the scenes on those sites when they're developing those products and see them evolve. So all of that is a combination of how you become geographically competent as far as from an appraisal practice. Also, USPAP also talks about the reporting. So when it comes time to actually report it, so you have to develop it, you're supposed to use the right information, the right comparables. You're supposed to use the apples to apples when you're developing, but also when you're reporting, you're required to have a clear and accurate report, and your report is required not to be misleading. Well, if you developed a report and you didn't use viable, accurate comps, of course, your report is not going to be accurate, and that's going to be misleading. So this is the 1-2 punch, and this is the verbiage, and it's the language, and this is how you're going to go at it when you are trying to get your reconsideration or get your appraisal corrected. Not from the vantage point of attacking the opinion of value, because I know it's ambiguous, but when they say opinion of value, it gets a little subjective. And so you want to focus on the inaccuracies and the mistakes that it took for them to get to that opinion of value. So rather than just saying, hey, I don't like the value that I had, I feel that my house is worth more, you have to kind of go backwards and work in terms of the nuts and bolts on the mistakes, the actual mistakes that were made in order for that appraiser to get to that to that value conclusion. So we'll talk about that just a little bit more. Just want to talk about the key differences on the different avenues that you get valuation information, because this is very important, because this is where a lot of the misconceptions go. Online real estate platforms, that's like your Zillow, Trulia, the Redfins and what have you. Online real estate platforms, they're not regulated by any government. They're not required to have accurate information. Those are not appraisals. Those value algorithms are not appraisal based. Those are mainly for lead capture. You can use that when you're verifying some comparables to get a little information. You can use those when you're trying to, a lot of them have a lot more robust information if you're trying to find some additional information about different things. But when it comes time to, if you have an appraisal issue and you're ready for reconsideration of value and you're trying to make a case, you don't want to make that case pulling Zillow comparables, using information from that source, because it isn't reliable. It doesn't follow the appraisal format and protocol. Relative CMAs, BPOs, and comps. So a relative CMA, comparative market analysis, BPO, brokers price opinions, and comparables. So we all know what relatives roles are. They have two different roles. If you're on the buyer side, they're going to help you facilitate the purchase of the property. Before you bid on a property, they're going to do what's called a comparative market analysis. So you as a buyer, you get some indication of what the price points are. So you know where you want to make an offer and try to negotiate and pay fair market property. So that's the role of a CMA. Also for pricing when it comes time to sell. Broker's price opinion is relative's opinion on where they think they can sell it. Different objectives, but that's solid information. What's great about the working through the realtors and the information that's going through the realtors is that all of that database is going through a CMA. That is the primary database that is recognized. So the appraisers we pull our information from the same database that the realtors use, from that MLS. We rely on that information and accuracy of the information, and everything all the checks and balances are done through that. So when the lenders are going back through and they're doing their Q&A and everything, all the lenders are going right back to that, multiple listing services when they're going back forensically and Q&A wise when they're looking at that appraisal. They're not going to go to any online platforms at all. What's great about the realtors platform that we have in that database is that those realtors can pull comparables. So that realtor, they can really, tighten up their search rather than being broad and really find comparables that are apples to apples to yours. And they can segment that, by property type, based by the finishes, They have all type of tools that they can put all the maps and everything. They can capture the information and make your case with those exhibits. So what's most important when you're making those exhibits, pictures are worth 1,000 words. So when you're compiling these comparables, when it comes time to make your case, is that they're able to not only print the listings and the data that's there, they also can print off those supplemental photos. They also can create different graphs, which shows the direction. As you know, bankers love graphs. They love a line that's going upward. Upwards is upwards. So if you're in the neighborhood and it's and it's an appreciation, and when you have all of those graphs and all those tools that are there, all of that's going into that packet that they sent you the link to. That's going to help with that. The difference from an appraisal standpoint is, first and foremost, is that I just touched on those two standards that we're going to use to protest appraisals. We just talked about just the development and the reporting standard, but that USPAP is probably a 300-page document. It covers every standard, covers everything from highest and best use, how and when, and every aspect on valuating property. So USPAP is the base. In addition to USPAP, appraisals have to present their report and analyze data based on all of the users. So when there's an appraisal done, of course, it's used for collateral, but there's various end users of that appraisal. So that appraisal is not just the lender that's lending the money. There's also the GSA. That's also the person that that bank is going to sell that loan to, whether it's Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. That person's going to buy that loan and sell it. So they have their own criteria and their own overlay of what they want you to analyze. They want you to show, hey, did you look at this? I want you to look at that. Provide me this information showing that that the checks and balances and that this. Also, there's insurers involved. So if you get an FHA loan or some of the other ones, they're insuring if your loan goes bad. So FHA has their own criteria, their own overlays. So all of that, it's a lot of more information that goes into an appraisal. A lot of other things that we're analyzing. So the end result, when that information goes into that grid, those little check boxes, it's not just cursory information. It's actually information has been analyzed through stratification and segmentation. And then the results of that is plugged into that. So every one of those line items, every one of those grids, that has been analysis has been done line item by line item. That information and the results is what goes into that grid. So oftentimes you see the grid and you think that it is cursory. So those are the key differences amongst the three. Ultimately, what you're making your case for, ultimately, when your appraisal doesn't appraise out, is that appraiser didn't use the principle of substitution. The principle of substitution is really apples for apples. So, if your property has a certain level of improvements, those comparables should have those same level of improvements. If they don't, how it's often done is that they're not using substituting comparables. If they're not using substituting comparables, if they're inferior, more than likely there is a different price point. And so if they use comparables that might be slightly inferior, you might see a price difference of appraisal where it might be 15, 20,000. But in some cases, as you've been reading from various news articles and sources, that there have been appraisals where the price has been $100,000, $200,000 off. So that lets you know that they are not using substituting comparables. If they're not using substituting comparables, go back to the first slide when we talked about they did not develop the appraisal the way that they were supposed to do. That is a USPAP violation. As a result, it was not reported accurately. That is a USPAP violation. So that's how you're going at it. So this is that you're going to use, these are the language that you're going to use. So when you're going and you're looking at those comparables, if those was inferior, you're going to go in, hey, comparable number one is not a substituting sale to the subject. It is inferior based on this. So that is, and what's the supporting information? The realtor is going to have the supporting information that goes with it, right? You're going to have the interior and exterior photos of the house. They're going to have a list of the improvements that were done. You might have a scope of work from the contractor that did the work. You're going to have all of that documentation. that's going to go along with that, that's making your case for them to get it right. When appraisers are doing appraisals, as of 2010, after the market crashed, they put in a more of a uniform way that they want appraisers to categorize properties. When you categorize it, then you find substituting comparables, and then ultimately those substitute comparables will have assigned values to it. So there's three main categories that are properties. We have to define properties in these three categories. And the first thing that you're looking for on that appraisal report is to see how they categorize your property. So the first categorize that they use in a uniform appraisal data set is called not updated. So not updated doesn't mean distress. So this doesn't mean just, that we're talking about distressed property. So this can be your typical mom or grandma's house, it's well kept. You can eat off the floor, but the finishes might be from 1985. It's functional houses, but it's dated to today's buyer standards in terms of the finishes and fixtures. Okay. The category number 2 is updated. That means that a home that has some modernization feel to it, that they have replaced or updated some features in the home, but overall the feel does have an updated feel to it. So you might have, in the kitchens and the baths, you might want done 1 or 2 different things. If it throughout the flooring, you might have updated from carpet to hardwood floors. Updated, you might have, when you bought the home, it might have had, the original wood windows. Now you have the thermoplane, double insulated windows and things of that sort. And these definitions that are here, these are actually drop downs in the appraisal. So these actually should come up, and these are in the appraisal. It should say updated, not updated, or remodeled. So you're going to make sure that for the subject property that first of all, that they categorize your property right. And then when you go and look at the different comparables, you're going to make sure that those are apples to apples as well. The last category, remodel, and this is how the UAD and Fannie Mae distinguishes remodel. This is their definition, where you have multiple alterations. It doesn't mean that you have to make structural changes. This is your typical renovation, where you've gone in and basically renovated the whole house, updated your kitchens and baths, your lighting, just a major overhaul or major renovation overhaul. It doesn't mean that you had to go in and make structural changes, but you basically overhaul. So, and typically in terms of appraisals that have not been evaluated property, it's the subject that has been like totally remodeled, where they're using comparables that really fall into that, updated, category, which is a completely different price point and for that. So in terms of appraisal red flags, so when you get the appraisal, like where are you looking? So you get the appraisal, it can be a little bit overwhelming because it's so big, a lot of information you're going into, like where am I looking to find, where are the mistakes at? Where am I looking to see where the apples are apples? So you're going to be looking in the subject section. You're going to be looking at an improvement section for the subject, and also in the sales comparison grid. Okay, so let's just start in the improvement section, where to look. This improvement section has to do with the subject. So right then under the description, that's where you should look under there. You should have the category, and you look and make sure that he put in the right category, he or she put in the right category for your house, and make sure that they categorize it right based on the improvements that are there. In addition to the category that's there, this is where the appraiser is supposed to type in and give a good narrative overview of all the improvements that have been made to the property. You're not limited to these 4 or 5 lines. You can go into addendum, you can attach scopes of work or whatever. So to have a credible report, oftentimes where mistakes are made is that appraisers are cursory and they're not putting down and doing the work and putting down putting down and acknowledging all the improvements that are made for the subject property, and which holds them to the fire to make sure that the comparables that are used in the report actually match. So you're going to look right here in this description part to make sure that that information is correct. Also under the square footage that I have highlighted there, Oftentimes, the square footage, if they're cutting corners, they might be pulling in the square footage for the subject and the comparables just from public records. Assessors don't keep track of additional improvements that are made to your house. So they don't know if you've updated your attic, which is giving you additional square footage that you may use for bedrooms, bathrooms, living areas. Assessors don't know what's going on in your basements. They don't know if it's been finished or additional rooms. So all of your square footage above and below, and also if you've made any additions to your house, if you put on an addition, or sometimes you have an enclosed area that you've actually made that heated and finished that it's actual living area. So when you're the owner of the house, if you're refinancing, doing any type of renovation loan, you're gonna make sure that the appraiser actually, when he comes out to your house, you're going to make sure that he actually pulled out a tape measure and he used some type of measuring device that he actually measured your property to make sure that your square footage is right and or accurate. That's a red flag if you come out and he's just kind of taking information and he leaves, and that you didn't actually see him physically measure your property. So that's a good indication that he didn't follow the proper protocol. So now we're going to the comparable grid. So where you see the line that says condition, it goes across, and quality of construction. Under condition, in addition to your categorize, there are conditions that have ratings from condition 1 through 6. So you're looking there and see what rating they gave the subject. So if your subject is rated C3, you want to see that all of the other comparables, when you look at those interior photos, you're going to make sure that the improvements match. So say for instance, C3 might be, this goes beyond just the category that we talked about in renovation. It goes even further. So this is an addendum that goes in all appraisals that you can see what the current UAD data set is for the categories. So you can see what is the condition rating, C1 through 6. So you can familiarize yourself with all of those 6 categories. And I didn't put that in the presentation. I don't want to make that too long. But I think we do have that to provide for you. But you want to make sure that that is true to life. So whatever condition rating that they have for the subject, first of all, that represents what your property is. But secondly, if they gave the comparables that same rating, you're going to judge and see, hey, are these conditions the same, by looking at those comparables, not only just the MLS sheets, but you're also going to look at the supplemental photos for the comparables. And that's how you're going to make your cuts, because oftentimes right here is where you can say, hey, look at these photos of these comparables. These improvements are far inferior to what my property is. As a result, you developed and reported inaccurate. That's a completely different price point. Same thing on quality of construction. Quality construction has ratings from Q1 through 6, and those have those definitions. You want to make sure that those are true to life. And those can be verified when you're doing forensically, going back and looking at those comparables, looking at those photos and say, okay, does the rating that they gave for myself along with those comparables, are they fair? Are they accurate? Do they look right to the eye? Same thing with gross living area that we said. We want to make sure that the gross living area is correct for not only for the subject, but also across the comparables, and make sure any adjustments that were made, that it just wasn't plugged in information from public records that might be inaccurate. So here's the check. These are the checkdowns. So when you're looking at the appraisal as a homeowner, or you're sitting down with them on the front lines, you're going through and looking at the appraisal. You want to check these things and see if these things are accurate. In the subject section, you're going to see is the census neighborhood, or whatever category you use from your state. Are they in the same neighborhood? So oftentimes that we've seen in our market, appraisers, you might be looking in one neighborhood, but they might be using comparables that are in a different neighborhood, even if they might be that short distance away. But as you know, in our market here, what school that you go to, elementary, high school, all the other advantages that you have are different, and they're based on your neighborhood. So you make sure that neighborhood information is correct. You want to make sure that the zoning information is correct. Oftentimes they don't have the correct zoning for the property. Zoning for your property has value, because that determines what use you can have. So based on the zoning that you have, you can be inferior to some of the comparables based on that you can do more things legally right now with your property based on the way that it is zoned. Under the improvement section, we talked about the gross living area. We talked about the condition ratings. Also in all the major improvements of the subject described correctly and thoroughly. So that's one of the major things that a lot of appraisers might be doing. High volume, low touch work. They're not putting the work in to actually capture, what your property is. If they haven't captured it, they're not going to capture the appropriate comparables. In the sales grid, that's just, again, I'm just putting these down in check marks. You're looking at the living area, the conditions. Lastly, on the reconciliation of market value, the bullseye. Oftentimes there's a misconception that appraisals is some type of blended approach, some type of average. So you might have 3 comparables and they might have different end values after adjustments been made. So evaluation is a bullseye. You have to point at the comparable that is, in your opinion, as appraiser's opinion, that is apples to apples. So you want to see it. Okay, what comparable? Even though you offered, you might have put 3 appraisals, 3 comparables in there, 4, 5, or 6. It doesn't matter. The appraiser is required to say, okay, we've analyzed the market, we've made all the adjustments, and all of these comparables together provide support, for the market value. But an appraiser has to point at one and say, hey, this is the one that I'm hanging my head on that I think that is the most substituting property. And, from a reconciliation standpoint, make sure that the one that he's pointing at, that you feel that best represents, your home and its improvements, and the resulting value, falls out from there. So in summation, just the tips to prevent or build your case is to be proactive. Oftentimes, when they come to you, is after they've already had the bad valuation. What inhibits that is to be proactive and have that appraisal package up front. Appraisal packages up front work for all facets of the real estate transaction. So if you're a buyer, even though you're a buyer and you have your own buyer's agent, you want to have your agent communicate with the seller's agent, say, hey, here's the comps that I got, you got. Let's make sure that we're providing this appraisal, because the appraiser is going to contact the seller's listing agent to get access to the property and facilitate that appraisal through the seller's agent. So you want you as a buyer, even before you get to appraisal process, to make sure that you don't rely on the seller's agent, because the seller, you want to make sure that your agent is communicating with the other side, and you guys collectively, both relatives on both sides, are helping put together that appraisal package for that property, for that collateral. That's the comparables, that's the photos, that's the scope of work, that's the list of the bullets of all the improvements that have been done, any other things that attribute to market value in that, so that you can make your case that, hey, before he even showed up, we sent him this appraisal package. He or she had this information before they even went out. And it's harder for them to make those mistakes or to be blatant when accurate information is presented up front. So that's always the good tip. If you're doing a reconsideration after the fact, of course, you're preparing this package and presenting that after the fact. When you use those MLS photos, a picture tells 1,000 words. Oftentimes is that, you have to make sure that, you're putting in as many supplemental photos and making a case through the photos of those improvements that you have, both for the subject and for the comparables. Cite the USPAP appraisal development and reporting standards errors in your complaint. So when you're going at it, you're going to right click, copy and paste, and you say, hey, this appraiser error in the development of the appraisal. This is per standard 1-1, the appraiser, you're listing out, exactly, under each category, in the development of the appraisal, he used inferior comparables, inferior sales based on the improvements that were there as a result. And when you go into USPAP 2.1 in terms of the reporting, as a result, the reporting was not credible. So you want to just go back and just use that same verbiage, because when you're talking about USPAP, violation or an accusation, those things do have to, all of those complaints do have to be looked at and addressed through the state, so they won't be just dismissed, saying that they do not they do not approach or deal with opinions of value. So just stick to the USPAP violations when you are trying to get a reconsideration of value, or when you go into those different state agencies. Avoid subjectivity when you're making the accusations. So, try to stick to the facts and the information that is there, so that you stay a professional in that. Focus on the errors rather than attacking the opinion of value. So again, as I said before, just don't focus on the end. Say, hey, the value is wrong. You lowballed appraisal. Your value is wrong. Just stick on how they got there. The more of the hurricane in terms of the development, rather than the heavy winds in terms of the evaluation. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts. I know it can probably feel a little overwhelming, just getting a lot of this information from an appraisal standpoint, what it is, but how to look for it. But as they say, the best way to learn something is to teach it. So as you start doing these reconsideration of values and start dealing with these complaints and trying to get things corrected for the homeowners and for the sellers, this will become second nature to you, just as we all learned about some of the other aspects in real estate. So I understand that we're going to take questions at the end. So Fallon, I'll turn it back over to you, and we'll take questions at the end.
Thank you, Andre. Let me pull my slideshow back up. So next steps, so once the home buyer submits the dispute to their lender, the lender will review it and check if it meets their guidelines and forward that request to the appraiser. So typically the appraiser will always respond either outlining the alternative comps your client provides and why they are valid or not. And the appraiser has two options to either republish the report and send it back to the lender for review, or conduct a second appraisal. And a second appraisal occurs, there is new information to be considered that was not available during the first appraisal. So if your client needs to file an appraisal complaint, who do you go to? So first, we want you to fill out that appraisal incident form that we dropped in the chat earlier, so we can better understand your situation and help you seek relief. So we can help you file an official complaint, speak with your lender, or get a second opinion. And there are also agencies that regulate the appraisal industry that you can also file a complaint with. I will send out a PDF version of this that lists exactly which agency to go to for your specific issue, that complaint portal, how to contact them, number, email address, and also information on what exactly that agency is in charge of. So I will send that out, and that can be used to see what exactly the issue is and who to file that complaint with. And that is the end of our workshop.
Well, not necessarily the end.
Yeah, definitely questions and answers.
All right. So
wrong order.
It's okay. I see a couple of questions in the Q&A box. If you didn't think of it because you were so engrossed in the learning, but you still have those questions, feel free to drop those in the Q&A box. But let's go ahead and go back to the beginning a little bit. When we're talking about the different types of appraisals, i.e. desktop, drive-by, can a specific type of appraisal be requested? Or no, you're at the luck of the draw, whatever the lending institution chooses or the appraiser chooses?
The first, yeah. Typically, what type of appraisal is that's ordered, that's driven from the lender. So the lender will determine if they will accept a desktop appraisal, and or if they want to order a full appraisal. So typically the lender decides what type of assignment that they want for your property. Then they reach out to the appraisal for that assignment. I will say that if you have the choice in contacting that lender, you're going to get a more accurate appraisal, more valuation of your property if you get a full appraisal. Just desktop appraisals, sight unseen appraisals, are just really not are really not the way to go unless you're in some type of subdivision or a tract. So, so if you're in a subdivision and a developer built 100 homes, 100 townhomes, everything is the same. They built the same level of finishes and what have you. I mean, that's apples to apples. But as here in Chicago, I mean, you can have on the outside from a curb appeal, you can have 20 homes on both sides of the street, and the values can be completely different between you and your next door neighbor because the value is on the improvement inside. You can't see the improvements unless you go inside and do a full, a full site visit, a full appraisal. So, especially if you have to pay for it, because if you pay for a desktop appraisal, it doesn't go your way, then you're gonna be like, okay, who's gonna pay for the next one? So I would definitely contact the lender and say, hey, I would like a full appraisal, and it's not much difference. And we're talking about collateralization, and you're trying to purchase a property, which is a big ticket item, and or you're trying to refinance and make some leverage from renovations. This is a large transaction, so I don't think you want to really try to save yourself $100 and then it just kind of blows up in your face. So I would definitely make sure that I request a full appraisal.
It. And similar to that, are appraisals still selected by a third party rather than a lender to avoid that conflict of interest?
It's a combination of both. So what happened after the real estate crash, as you know, with the Franklin Dodd, and I got the interaction is that they're trying to have some separation where between the lender, loan officers, and the appraisers. So they don't want any perceived influence. So a majority of lenders have an appraisal management company that they order the appraisals through. The appraisal management company is responsible for going out and seeking and having in their pool appraisers, that are qualified for the market that they're going to be appraising in, and they actually manage the process. So they are required for the recruiting, also selecting and assigning that appraisal. So when appraiser gets assigned to your property, it's not supposed to be random. It can't just be random. I just went out there and said, okay, I'm gonna send over this person today. They're supposed to be selected by their geographical competence in that market that you're in. And so that's up to the AMC. They're supposed to vet the appraisers, and also in terms of the management of, so those appraisal management companies, of course, do the QA on the appraisal and handle and facilitate if there's any issues as far as those reconsideration of value. There are a couple of lenders, a couple of large lenders that have their own appraisal pool. That means that they don't work through a separate appraisal management company, but they have their own internal pool of appraisals that have been with them over time. And then those are assigned to just that pool of appraisals that are in their own pool, and they kind of manage their own pool of appraisals. That would be like like a Loan Depot or something of that sort. Yeah. So it's kind of a combination of both. It's kind of a lender to lender, on that.
But still the goal being no more appraisal shopping or value shopping is the end goal, of course.
Right, absolutely.
And then one of the questions we have, Fluke, if you've made renovations to your home, but your neighborhood has a history of low appraisal, how do you make your case?
Well, what we talked about through the presentation today, I'm sure some of that is going to guide you on your way, is that first of all, you have to document your improvements. So when you're working through a realtor and you are having those realtors pull those comparables and you're making that appraisal package, you're presenting that package to the appraisal before they even do the appraisal. So how you guard against that, how you fight against that, even if, and how you turn the tide of if appraisal after appraisal after appraisal has been lowballed in my community, is that you have to be proactive when it comes time for for your evaluation. So if you hand in hand are providing that information to the appraiser up front that you've researched, so this is almost like You know, this is not like somebody's handing you, wants you to invest in a company and they just give you some blind perspective. You don't know what it is. Now you really have to, as homeowners, we really have to educate ourselves. You know, we can't be blind. We have to know, you know, what our value is, what are substituting comparables, what are appraisals looking for, what goes into that. So when you go through that process with your realtor and put together that appraisal package, and then after you've done all that right up front, and then an appraisal still comes in inaccurately, you are empowered to take those next steps, right? You go back to the lender and say, get it right. Okay, if you don't get it right, okay, now I'm gonna contact Neighborhood Housing Services, and they're gonna walk with me hand in hand on trying to make this thing right. What's our next step? Who are we going to next? You know, so that is how you do it. You have to be proactive first. And if you weren't proactive, if you're going on the back end, you know, you're going to go through what was in the presentation. You're going to go for that reconsideration of value. If you don't get the reconsideration of value, then you would contact NXS and try to go through some of the other channels. And even if you end up going to another lender and they end up going through, you still should document that and still make that, you know, that complaint of what happened to you. So even if you had to go in and make it right yourself, you still should log that, because ultimately what's attempting to be done now is that it's no longer where this is being brushed off. This is being acknowledged that this does happen. This is real. So now that the next step is that, okay, who's doing it? How frequently? So just imagine in your neighborhood now with that incidence survey that NHS has, is I'm gonna use myself for example. Say if Andre Lanier keeps doing an appraisal and he keeps coming up that he's being cited, they need reconsideration of value. I've done 50 appraisals in your neighborhood, and 15 of them, you know, I got complaints about reconsideration of value. At some point, I need to be, you know, my state and my other agencies need to have a sit down with me and say, hey, you know, something needs to go change. You need to, you know, you need to get some more education. You need to be cited. You need to be not allowed to do appraisals in this market, whatever those protocols are. But I think we're at the point right now is that, hey, first, let's do our job first, is that, hey, we know what an appraisal is. I know, you know, what my comparables are. I know, you know, I know what my principle of substitution is. Here's my data. You know, collect your data first. Make your case first. You got to make your case and be strong with it. And you can't do that, you know, by, you know, verbally and subjectively. You got to do it in writing. So the first step is that when you got that done through real estate professionals, you know, because you say, hey, I'm gonna take myself out of it. I got real estate professionals on hand. Make your case. Then what's going to happen is that in those different neighborhoods, those appraisers will eventually, if they don't get their act together, I'm sure that they will be black booked out of doing appraisals in the neighborhood. And you have to say to a lender, so if NHS comes to a lender, say, hey, this guy, you know, is not doing what he needs to be doing. That lender needs to say, okay, well, we're just not going to send him any more assignments. We recognize that he will not get any assignments in that particular community for our bank, you know, something along those lines. So I'm speaking subjectively. I'm not saying that that's the process, but that's how to answer your question in the long term.
Makes sense. And then a follow-up to an earlier question, I think, was in a refi and or drive-by or desktop appraisal, does the value matter if I'm assuming they're saying MV, I'm thinking the lender allows the desired amount?
Mark MV stands for market value.
Oh, market value allows the desired amount,
If that
desired loan amount.
Yeah, if that person is still on, I would ask them to kind of expound on that a little bit, because I don't quite understand the question just a little bit. So if they're still on, if Jeff, if you're still out there, if you can expound on that just a little bit, so we can make sure we understand your question, so we can answer it correctly. In a refi and the drive-by, or in the drive-by, does
All right,
the
can
matter?
you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
we can. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, for instance, you got a value that, you know, meets whatever's necessary to get the loan that you want, but you think that you were still lowball. does it really, is it, I mean, does that justify, pursuing a challenge? Because, you got the appraisal met the value that you needed in order to get the loan you desired, but you still feel that you were lowballed. I mean, that doesn't become public information, does it?
Okay, so say for instance, I'm just giving you an instance. So say for instance, you own a home, you got an appraisal, but you already have a lot of appreciation in it. You've owned it a lot. So, hey, just to, lenders typically refinance up to 80% loan to value, right? On the occupied home. So saying that even though it was lowball, you had enough equity there to cover and collateralize your loan, should you still report that? I will report any incident through NHS where the appraiser did not develop in the report your appraisal accurately, regardless of what the outcome. I'm glad that the outcome was that you were able to collateralize, you were able to get your loan. Some people might have to go to another lender and get it redone in order to get it done. So just because you had the outcome, I still will report that, because that is an instance that, again, that an appraiser is not developing and reporting the appraisals accurately in your community. So yeah, I would say I would report that to NHS at that point. Yeah. And I think that, if there are damages, if you're not able to go through with the transaction, anybody else that's listening, if it's going to result that your loan is being denied, you can't pull out enough money to make the renovations that you need, you promised your daughter if she got in college, you was gonna pay for it. Now you can't pull the money out and pay for it. Whatever harm this is real deals out here. So this is causing some harm to you. I don't say that in a joking way, but any way that it's not done, it's not developed. If it's not developed right, it's not reported right. You should report it, because that's the only way that you're going to get that long-term turnaround, as that other person said, in the neighborhood. That's how you turn it around. See something, say something.
Very good points. So that is the last of the questions I see in the Q&A box. Any final or closing words, Fallon or Andre, before we let the folks go back to their day of productivity?
The only question that I had is that, this is a fluid process that we're going through right now when you're trying to correct something. And so if you can communicate through the channels with NHS, any additional information that you need, or you encounter any problems that you're having, or how we can approach, getting a situation right, or any information that you need, because you're the one that's going to be out on the front lines. If we gave you too much, it's a little bit too much to chew. It's hard to, transfer that to the owners. Any way that we can get this information and empower you to empower the owner to turn this around, I would definitely be involved in a long-term process of getting that information to you so you can get the end result.
Awesome. 1 second, I'm seeing someone has their hand up. I don't actually see that. So in the interim, if you enjoyed this presentation, just know that we at Neighborhood Housing Services offer a number of workshops for both pre-purchase homeownership and those who are on their homeownership journey. And those classes or those workshops can be just as appropriate for you guys when wanting to cascade that information out to your clients. So do visit us at nhschicago.org /learn/workshops, and you can register for those workshops there. Still, we are doing our workshops virtually on Zoom, so love the convenience that you can take these workshops from anywhere or at any time. If there are no other questions, I want to thank you all for giving us part of your day and joining us for this super info. Every time I do this, I learn something else just when I thought I knew it all. So super thankful to Fallon and Andre for being so giving with the knowledge. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, NHS of Chicago. You are going to receive an email this afternoon with all of the resources and links that this team put together. and I hope I can see you in future trainings. Thank you again, Andre, Fallon, Tiffany, and everybody at NHS Chicago. Guys, thank you for joining us, and have a rest of the day good and sunny. It's very nice here. Bye-bye.